So over the past year or so, I found myself really getting into biographies and memoirs, specifically about famous writers. There are 3 biography and memoir recommendations about 3 very iconic female writers. The first one is Virginia Woolf, a biography by Alexandra Harris. I went through a really deep infatuation with Virginia Woolf last year. I was reading all of her books, and at one point during this obsession and infatuation, I purchased her biography and I read it, and after reading it, it made reading her work so much more interesting. It goes through a lot of her books and provides just so much context, and it just like it made me come to understand things that I wasn't quite catching upon my first reading of some of these books. It also goes into like her childhood, her relationships, like all of these things that make Virginia Woolf the person she is, which I think can just enrich your experience reading this author so much, especially thinking about these female writers who inject so much of themselves into their work. Just like knowing these things about them can really just like amplify your understanding of their works. Also, I was reading this while I was in London, which really just put me right there in the landscape of like the early happenings of the Bloomsbury group, and I just really felt like I was right there with her. It was amazing. The next one is Sylvia Plath, The Women in the Work. This is an anthology that was edited and introduced by Edward Butcher. What I love about this book is that it features different recollections of Sylvia Plath by a myriad of different people that knew her throughout her life. The first half of this book is basically the story of her life, but it's told through different point of views of people that knew her throughout her life. I found that really interesting because what you get at the end is like this really fragmented picture of her, which I feel like is so true to what we know about Sylvia Plath. So much juxtaposition and contradictions, but I feel like that just makes it even more interesting and more real. The second half of this book I really enjoyed. It was actually a critical analysis of her work, which I found super interesting and insightful. Just the way it jumps from story to story and then weaves it in to her work. It's not this idea of Sylvia Plath and then her work, it's like this idea of like her art and her reality just intermixing all together. Next one is a memoir by the iconic Simone de Beauvoir. This is Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter. This recounts Simone's early life from her childhood all the way up into her early years at Sorbonne, where she meets the famous Jean-Paul Sartre. Sort of tells the story of all the different relationships that sort of make her into the person she is, while also experimenting and expressing these like budding ideas of feminism. Also read this right after I went to Paris, and I really felt like I was right there with her.